Hi friends, who are the most underrated legends in Apex Legends Season 9? Well, I thought I'd look at the top 5 underrated legends today, and maybe give you an idea of what you might be missing out on by not using these legends. By underrated, I'm thinking about legends that maybe aren't talked about as much, or perhaps they have a lower pick rate, but they do actually have qualities which can help you win more games in Apex Legends. Have a listen, and I would say don't be afraid to try out one of these legends if you haven't already, because they might just help you win a few more games. The first on the list for the most underrated legend is Loba. If you didn't know, Loba actually had a really great buff this season that gives her full movement while using her bracelet. It's actually really powerful, and I just think people haven't noticed how useful this buff is for Loba. One key reason why Loba wasn't great before Season 9 is because of two reasons. The first, her tactical never worked. You would always get it pinged back to you and it just wouldn't transport you where you threw it, but that's mostly been fixed this season. And the other point is that her movement while using the bracelet was so slow, but now that's been completely removed and you've got full mobility while using the bracelet, and this is actually a lot stronger than you might think. Let's also not forget that her ultimate is also very useful, especially if you need ammo. It's just so easy to suck up all the ammo in the given area, and this not only gives you and your team an advantage, it also takes ammo away from enemy teams, as well as other useful items. I will admit her passive isn't quite as useful as some of the other legends passives, but you can still make good use of her passive, not just to see where good loot is for yourself, but it also does save you time, because if you know there isn't high tier loot in a given building or given area, it saves you time because you don't need to go and look in those buildings, because you know there's nothing of value in those buildings. So it can still be useful. In terms of the most improved legend, I think Loba's definitely up there this season, and I really do just think she's underrated, and if you look at her pick rate, it's still quite low at 4.3%. By the way, these are just rough stats in terms of pick rates, which have been calculated by ApexLegendsStatus.com, and it's based on a pool of their players, and it's a fairly large pool of players, so it should be relatively accurate, and I will be referring to the same stats across this video. Next on the underrated list is Crypto, who actually has the lowest pick rate of anyone on this list at 1.7%. Now this is an interesting choice because in top tier play, Crypto might not actually be classed as underrated, but I think if we look at Crypto on average across the game, I think it's fair to say that Crypto is definitely underrated, certainly going by his pick rate, and I think it's fair to say Crypto does probably have one of the highest skill ceilings out of any legend, so it does take a little bit more time and skill to master Crypto. What makes Crypto actually good though, and why he is so underrated, is because he's very good in offensive and defensive situations. You see, with his drone and ultimate, the EMP, you can use it as an offensive weapon, which means then when you're pushing a team, it's going to be a little easier for you to down the enemy opponents. Plus, you can leave the drone in a good position to tell you if enemies are approaching. It's also good defensively because the EMP can actually scare off opponents from pushing you. So if you're in a building and you feel like you're about to be pushed, you can EMP on yourself, and while yes it does slow you down, that effect is often enough to scare off opponents. And you can also use Crypto's drone kind of like a CCTV camera, where you can leave it in a doorway of a building or a given area. Even when you're moving on, it will still alert you if players are pushing in behind you. Often, particularly with less experienced players, I feel it's easy to get carried away with being stuck in the drone, and you kind of start venturing around the given area, and one common thing I see is that people chase enemies with the drone. Now if they're really far away, you really don't need to be doing this. So the key trick with Crypto is to try and reduce your drone time. Focus on shorter bursts of zoning areas, and if you do this, there can actually be a lot of benefit to running a Crypto in your team. Wattson is next on the underrated list with a pick rate of 2.1%, and I think it's fair to say she is definitely underrated. Now I know Wattson had a few issues at the start of Season 9 where her fences weren't dealing any stun damage, but that's actually been fixed now, and it leaves a very useful legend. Now I feel Wattson was often overshadowed by Caustic, but since his gassy powers have been nerfed, I feel like Wattson is actually a viable defensive legend to pick now. Her best qualities are using the fences to zone areas. Now most people think this is only a defensive tool, but actually you can use it offensively. You see, if you're 1v3ing a whole team, the strategy is always to separate that enemy team, and Wattson's fences allow you to zone off enemies so that can really help separate enemy teams. And this then becomes a really good offensive tool where you can use it to 1v3 a whole team. Another element of Wattson that's often overlooked or underrated is the fact that she has the smallest hitbox in the game along with Lifeline. Plus, she's also got really unique animations. That means when she moves, it can often be hard for enemies to hit her. And with the removal of low profile this season, this means Wattson is actually a very strong legend. And again, it's another situation where I think people just haven't quite noticed yet. Next on the list is Bangalore. Now, I think Bangalore's probably the least underrated in this list, but overall, compared to the other legends, I do still feel like Bangalore is underrated. If we look back towards the start of Apex Legends, Bangalore used to be one of the most popular legends, but as time has gone on and new legends have been introduced, we've seen very little changes to Bangalore's kit, and that's probably a tribute to how good she actually is, but it also means that people aren't really talking about Bangalore as much, and I feel like she's often overlooked as one of the stronger legends, and because of this, I think she's underrated. But let's not forget, this season, her smoke has had a really good buff where it's so much harder to see through it. And unless the enemy team has a digital threat scope or a Bloodhound scanner ultimate, it's going to be very hard for them to push through the smoke. And I really think Bangalore is effective in both modes, arena mode and battle royale. And because of this, I think Bangalore is actually a really strong legend that can really help you win more games. The final legend on this list is Gibraltar. Now I think this is another good example where a legend is used more in higher tier lobbies, and you even see a lot of Gibraltars being used in pro teams in the ALGS tournaments. And I think this is a testament to how good Gibraltar actually is. However, if we look on average across the game, he's got a relatively low pick rate at 3.5%. Now, I think this is because he's a big legend and it takes a certain amount of skill and situational awareness to play Gibraltar. And because of this, I think he's definitely underrated by a lot of people in the game. But those of you that play Gibraltar, you'll know he's actually a very strong legend. His dome can be one of the most useful tacticals in the game, especially when rotating between large areas or dropping into a late ring. On top of that, Gibraltar's ultimate is one of the only ultimates that can actually down a complete team, and let us also not forget the fact that Gibraltar's gun shield essentially gives him an extra 50 HP, so in theory this means he's got more base health than any other legend. So I think it's fair to say, if we look on average across the game, based on his pick rate, Gibraltar probably is underrated, but he's definitely a very good legend if you can learn to master him. Overall, I would say each of these legends are really strong, stronger than you might think, and they're definitely worth giving a go if you're wanting to try something new in Apex Legends Season 9. I hope you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.